Okay, hello everybody. So we are back today at today's second episode of Simplifying Bariatrics webinar series. And as usual, today we've decided to have it a bit more earlier at a different timing rather than a busy Saturday night. And as always, my partner in crime, none other than Mr. Vimal K. Vasudevan, our consultant general and MIS surgeon from Gleneagles Hospital, Penang. Hi, boss. How are you?
Hi, Guru. Fine, thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm tagging along with you.
Yeah. So I think, Mr. Vimal, maybe last week I spoke about the objective. So maybe this week you can say something about why we are doing this Simplifying Bariatrics series.
I think this is in response to the ongoing pandemic and the pandemic of obesity worldwide and Malaysia. So the problems associated with obesity is being seen more and more. So we in the Penang Weight Loss Clinic, we decided to take it up as a challenge to educate. We have seen a lot of problems in regards to reaching out and touching or reaching out to the appropriate category of people to whom this message should go. Yeah. So we thought of continuing on this journey of educating the public. Yeah. As a team, hopefully more and more people will get to know of this problem and know that there is a solution and know that the solution is safe if done in the right way. And there is a good team not too far away in Penang itself, which can manage these problems well.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, Mr. Vimal. I think very reassuring as well. I think in addition to what you just said, so I think this is a platform that we can have patients reach out to us as well for any doubts they may have or in their journey of going for surgery or even any other weight loss opportunities that they might think of and they need any suggestion, help and everything, we are there to guide them as well. Without further ado, today's topic is in a four-part series of discussion on topics of relevance to our patients in bariatric surgery. And today's session, which is the second out of a four series, is about the decision-making in bariatric surgery. Okay, so this is our team that I'm fortunate to work with, of course, with my dear friend, Mr. Vimal, and of course, our counselor, our case managers, our dietitians, psychologists, our nurses, and of course, our marketing team and our CEO as well. Mr. Vimal, you want to say something about our Penang Weight Loss winning the Global Health Awards last year?
Yes, this award came as a culmination of a lot of hard work and long and dedicated service by many people. It is not an award to one or two individuals. It's a award to the whole team of carers who care for all our patients. So this award was awarded for last year or year before last for consistently being a good weight loss option for people in the northern region, also rest of Malaysia in Penang.
Yeah. Well said. In fact, I think that's the most important part, a multidisciplinary team that takes you as a whole, not only just to lose weight, but also to take care of your metabolic issues, your cardiac issues. So we work with our cardiologists, we work with our endocrinologists, with our other colleagues in the imaging sectors and so on. So we have all the specialties to actually take care of you in your journey of weight loss and subsequently in your management of your day-to-day life after that as well. So today we are talking about why do you need to decide if you're going to do bariatric or metabolic surgery and what are the factors that influence it. Okay, so I think Mr. Vimal, you start with maybe the medical issues.
Yeah. So we know weight loss surgery can result in a lot of weight loss, as which is sustained and results in many medical and social, cosmetic, psychological benefits to patients. Okay. This has been proven time and again in many studies done both locally as well as internationally, presented in many journals, published in many presented at many congresses and published in many journals and articles. So the most common medical issues are usually, diabetes and sleep apnea, hypertension, cardiac problems. Patients as a result of the obesity, their medical health is affected. So the most common ones are these just that I just mentioned. Of course, the risk of cancer. Sometimes or patient having recovered from a cancer and with obesity, so the patients don't want recurrence of their malignancy, then they seek us out to help them deal with their obesity. Then, of course, there are also a group of people who are health conscious. They don't have any particular medical problems, but they are obese and they have family history of medical problems like diabetes and hypertension and all those things. So they approach us with view of preventing these diseases from affecting them in the future. This is actually a very good group of patients who, if successfully operated and lose weight, they can prevent the development of these medical issues in the future. Of course, a lot of patients come to us and they say they want to lose weight and look nice, fit into their clothes which they were using years ago, So for the positive impact of being slimmer. Okay. Social factors and psychological factors, maybe I can ask Mr. Kiru to explain a bit more.
So social is basically your day-to-day interaction. Maybe some people, because of the stigma associated with obesity, they find that when they go to work, they are the topic of ridicule from their colleagues, friends. They always say, "Hey, here comes the guy with a big weight." They have terms, very degrading terms like fatso, gemuk, and all that thing. So sometimes they've been through that for so many years and they've tried everything and they feel like this is something that they want to do without. They want to feel a life where they're not psychologically or socially impacted. They don't feel like the odd one out in the group, the big guy is coming. And then sometimes when you go to a restaurant or you're sitting even in the LRT and then you're so big size, when you sit in a chair, you are actually cramping into 2-3 people. So this is where you feel socially, inadequate, not right. The other issue could be socially inaptitude in certain other conditions, maybe in the way that you look, because of some women having PCOS, hirsutism, they have a lot of facial hair and all that. So this makes them socially difficult in getting married, having a personal social life and so on. So some of them come to us because of that, a change of that. They want to, change their fortunes and try to get, get a spouse and get married and so on. So there are a lot of things that are involved. Psychological, of course, because of all this comment on their mental issue and all that and so on. They feel like, why not opt for a solution where they get a long-term benefit besides just medical issues, health issues and so on, but also you get a positive well-being to you. So sometimes if you look at the being positive in your life, you have to look at the external factors also. You can be as positive as you want to be, but if everyone around you is very negative, you're in a situation with COVID, the people around you, there's no jobs and so on. You can't be alone being happy on your own as well. So this is where by doing something positive like this also, it may change your circumstances. So again, there are multiple issues or multiple reasons. And looking at all this, Mr. Vimal, besides in making the decision, now we know about the why. Now let's talk about the who. Who actually, decides in whether the person is actually going to go for surgery or not. In your experience and my experience, we both know also, the patient will come and tell us, yeah, I've heard a lot about it. Thank you, doctor, for explaining. Now I need to go back and ask my wife, or I need to go back and get permission from my parents. So in looking at our what we have listed here, maybe we can take it one at a time. Maybe you start with the perspective.
Actually, I agree with you. This is quite a big issue. Who is involved in decision making? Compared to the Western countries, we are Asians. I think apart from the patients, there seem to be a lot of decision makers who are associated with the patient. So if you look at it from the patient perspective, like you said, I think a rough estimate is like 20 to 30% of patients who come and see us subsequently go on to the treatment phase. You know, most of them, a large proportion, up to 70%, they just come. Okay, we counsel them and discuss with them everything, and then they said we need to go back and talk to either husband, father, mother, like that. So there is obviously a decision maker. So this is a patient's perspective. Sometimes they know about it. They are a bit shy to come forward, so they will come alone. But when it comes to decision making, they want to consult, and it should be like that. At least in the Asian community. That's why when we counsel also, even when patient is very keen on the next step where we investigate and counsel for surgery, we often ask them whether they want to get their family included in the decision making. Okay, especially so for those who are younger or probably married. So this is a very important component from patient perspective as well as involving the family. Physicians and surgeons, I think they have a very important role to play. Most of the time, our referrals come from other physicians, like cardiologists who have patients who are obese and hypertension, diabetes, and then they have cardiac illnesses. So it is very urgent for them to lose weight. These patients have tried other means and have not succeeded. So these physicians will refer them to us. So this is a physician's perspective of sending. Of course, finally, the decision of whether the patient requires surgery, what types of surgery are possibly best option for the patient, that rests with the surgeon. Kiro, any other thing you would like to add on?
Yeah, I think you've covered it quite well also, because I think that covers about all the perspectives that we know of. So maybe everyone who's in attendance today, if you feel that there's other perspective that needs to be taken about, then maybe we can discuss on that. Because sometimes I also know that certain people will go and see the priest or to have God's input and God's perspective in this, and looking at the fortune teller and see so whether the Rasi, the timing is good, the fortune teller say it's okay, or God said this is the correct time for me or not. So there is other perspective. It's not a joke actually. It's really because it's a cultural perspective and religious perspective as well.
I think we respect all that.
Yeah.
Their own beliefs. And normally my advice will be to do whatever their own beliefs, to practice it in tandem with what we do for them.
Yeah. The main thing is that what we're trying to say is that please let us know what is in the decision making, because you know why? We might be thinking that you are the one who's solely making a decision, and when we communicate to you, but the other factors involved and everything, and then in the end of the day, you're not going to take an action because you haven't considered on the whole aspect of it before you take a step forward. So that's why it's very important. Always know where you are and what you need to do. Okay, next part is who needs the surgery and who qualifies for the surgery. Okay, a lot of people, I've even had a person who is BMI 27.5 coming and saying that, doctor, I've heard about bariatric surgery. I want to do bariatric surgery. And I want to do the sleeve gastrectomy because my friend in KL did it or something like that. So again, question, Mr. Vimal, whether this kind of patients who, based on the guidelines. So basically we want to share about the guidelines. What do the guidelines say? Okay, so maybe before I talk about it, Mr. Vimal, maybe you can say something a little bit about what is our guidelines actually, and as surgeons, how are we aligned to these guidelines?
Okay. To those watching this slide, please don't try to read it. These are basically guidelines. Guidelines means a set of common practices which result in good results. which a set of good practices which will have good outcomes after surgery. Okay, so there are many guidelines for many diseases. So these guidelines are thought of by experts in the field of obesity and bariatric surgery. These are people who have years of working with obese individuals with medical problems, and they have written many scientific papers, published them, which has been reviewed and accepted internationally. So mostly a lot of regions these guidelines go by. We have American guidelines, we have European guidelines, we may have country specific like Australian guidelines, Asia Pacific guidelines. Okay, so what these guidelines tell us is when to operate, when not to operate. Before the surgery, how do we investigate the patient? Before the surgery, how do we investigate the patient? How do we ensure patient recovers after surgery as safely as possible with the least amount of complications? And if there are complications, how do we manage them? Which kind of centers are able to manage obesity and do surgeries on patients who are obese safely? What number of cases a surgeon should have done to qualify to do these cases safely? This is what all these guidelines say. So suffice to say that we as a team in Penang Weight Loss, Gleneagles, we have to follow guidelines given to us. We cannot change it or use it to our whims and fancies. But however, on and off, when very special cases, these guidelines allow us to think outside the box and care for the patient in the best interest of patient care.
Yeah, well said, Mr. Vimal. I think we will discuss the guidelines further in detail after this. Another, I think, very important point of having guidelines is to protect our patients, because you know very well that all these guidelines, they are actually formulated, like Mr. Vimal said, with a lot of expert committee members inside there to actually look after you all as patients, and also to look after us as surgeons as well, to know when we should be operating, when we shouldn't be operating, who we should be operating and who we shouldn't, like Mr. Vimal said. So that was all the guidelines that you all saw overseas, in European guidelines, American and so on. So in terms of obesity management in Malaysia, you have the primary and secondary prevention of cardiovascular disease. As you can see here, is very small. I'm very sorry for that, but you can see that there are guidelines for medication, pharmacotherapy for weight loss, and also bariatric surgery. It's very clearly spelled out what is the indication and who shouldn't be doing. We also have the guidelines in the latest guideline for diabetes management. So for diabetes management, many of you all will know in the series that we are talking in this 4 series of bariatric surgery, that one component of bariatric surgery is metabolic surgery, which is the treatment for the remission for the potential cure of diabetes. Okay, so that's the exciting part. And in this guideline itself, they are talking quite extensively about the surgical option, which is bariatric surgery. Mr. Vimal, our team, we were part of a group that actually formulated the guidelines for bariatric surgery for Malaysia. And we had an expert committee formed by KKM way back about 2-3 years ago, where myself, Mr. Vimal, our colleagues all were part of the team. And we had come up together to form the consensus guidelines for bariatric surgery. Mr. Vimal, you want to speak more about this?
Okay, so many years ago, this consensus of opinion of experts in this field was formulated by the Ministry of Health. So they invited surgeons who represent the Ministry of Health, the university hospitals, and the private hospitals together. In initial, the first 1 or 2 meetings were held in Penang. Subsequently, we went to KL and all that. We had a couple of meetings. So this team came together. This was not only surgeons. We also had dietitian, we had physiotherapists, we had endocrinologists and anesthetists in this group. And we also had the pleasure of having the head of the surgical services who was chairing the meeting. So through this combined effort of all these experts, we came up with this consensus of opinion, which advises surgeons in Malaysia how to manage patients who come with obesity who requires possibly surgery.
Yes, correct. And from these guidelines is what we will be discussing about the indications for bariatric surgery, which is the first indication for those who have a weight, body weight with a BMI of more than 37.5. Now, if you see the most of the guidelines from the Western part, from our colleagues in America, Australia, and so on, their BMI for bariatric surgery will start at 40. 40 being grade 3 obesity and above. For us as Asians, our obesity begins at 2.5 points below the Western counterpart. So that's why BMI 37.5 is taken as a cutoff point for those without any medical problems. Okay. Now, if you have diabetes, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, medical issues, 2 comorbidities beyond so on, then you are at higher risk to develop comorbidities because of obesity, even resulting in death. So that's why we have lowered down the BMI to 32.5 in this group of patients. Okay. For patients who have a lower BMI with medical problems, now this is a very special category where it is in the guidelines for patients who are less than 32.5 BMI can undergo surgery under very strict protocol, okay, in expert teams who have experience in managing obese patients with a dedicated multidisciplinary team. Mr. Vimal, your point of view?
Yes. So this is very important for not only surgeons who are handling, patients also, and the caregivers have to be aware, because these are very important parameters, especially if you are dealing with low BMI, that below 32.5, you cannot simply walk into any surgeon and do the surgery, because although these patients are not very heavy, the surgery may be simple, but the patients heal differently and the risk of the surgery will be higher. That's why it has to be done in a teaching hospital, university-based, or as a part of a trial, or in very expert hands. Very few people in this country have this expertise. So you must ask whether the surgeon is comfortable operating very low BMI, patients who have diabetes with low BMI. Okay, but for high BMI, those with the 32 to 37 and medical problems, generally most surgeons can do if they are comfortable and they have got good results. Yeah. But a team is still necessary for the low BMI, for all, especially for the low BMI.
Right, correct. Well said, boss. Another very important part, I think a lot of our viewers probably will ask, for the children. Okay, we have decided during when we did the consensus guidelines that bariatric surgery will be recommended for patients 18 years and above and 65 years and below. So I will take the lower limit range, Mr. Vimal, and you take the higher range. So we decided for 18 years and above because the age of maturity is expected to be 18 and above when you can sign consent, when you are ready to drive, get your license and so on. So this age is a fixed based on our, what do you call it, political laws, the laws of the government, laws of Malaysia. And using that into account, when the patient is able to understand what we are trying to say, we feel that the maturity age is 18 years old. But having said that, I think Mr. Vimal and myself, so we have operated on conditions like Prader-Willi, where patient is already having, endocrine disorder and all that, special cases where the pediatrician will get in touch with us and talk to us to operate on these patients. Although it's not very common, but there are certain situations like he had mentioned earlier, in very special circumstances, we have to do it under institution protocol and so on. But I'm very interested about the elderly age, Mr. Vimal, because I know where you have a very large series of cancer surgery, colon cancer, as well as functional dyspepsia cases of individuals beyond 70 years and above. So do you think we should be still restricting to 65 as per the guidelines, or is there an opportunity to, for those who are even older to even consider bariatric?
That's an excellent point of view. Now, when you look at the older people, years ago, we used to think, okay, 65, above that, people, they were high risk of morbidity or in dying or having complication after surgery because they are old, their body cannot take this kind of surgeries. But over the years, I would say the last 20 years, surgery has become a lot safer. Nowadays, we are doing laparoscopic surgery, keyhole, with small incisions, less pain, quick recovery, less complications, less bleeding, less infection. So all this reduces the risk of complications. So much so that we are able to do older and older people, and generally we don't look at age as a criteria anymore. Many studies have given up looking at age as a criteria. Sometimes people are 60 years old, but their body behaves like almost 90 years old. Some people are 90 years old, but their body behaves like 60 years old. Yeah. So each person has to be individually ascertained, assessed, and managed. So our experience comes from, like you said, operating on a large, fairly large amount of patients who are elderly, referred by the cardiologists, who seem to have patients who are older. So 70, 80, 85, don't seem to be a cutoff in terms of age, really. And we are talking about major surgeries where we are doing removal of colon, removal of stomach, hernia surgery at the chest, hiatus hernia, this kind of surgeries. So we are able to do and discharge them well and with good quality of life on follow-up and with the very, very minimum complications. So based on this, we know we can do this kind of surgery in older people. So we start pushing the limits, okay, for bariatric too. But the catchword here is it's not the surgery. Yeah. The surgery is just a technical aspect. You just go in, cut, do the bypass or sleeve or whatever and finish. But the operative care during and after, anesthesia, that's why your team is important. You need anesthetists who are comfortable managing elderly people. But if they are used to managing elderly people, then they are comfortable managing elderly people with obesity also. So in that way, we have operated with people close to 70 or so with who require bariatric surgery, and this was, they are doing well after a few years of surgery or so. Their diabetes has resolved, the hypertension medication has really reduced, and patients are happy. So age should not be a criteria, but their physical fitness should be a criteria. This is what I think, and our consensus also agrees with this. However, the center doing should have experience of managing, the team managing obesity, which includes the cardiologist and the anesthetist as well. And the staff should be able to manage elderly people in the HDU, in the ward. HDU, because we know elderly people present a specific risk. The elderly people with obesity present an extra risk, isn't it? Yeah. So as long as we know all these risks, we study the risks and we manage them, the outcome will be good.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mr. Because sometimes when you look at our patients, they are a very clear group. Those who are elderly, who feel they are not elderly, they will tell you, doctor, I'm 65, I'm okay, I want to go for the surgery and so on. And you have a patient who is 53, 54, who feel they are elderly, and they will tell you, doctor, I'm already 53, 54, I'm
old.
I'm old. Yeah. So,
but nowadays people live longer. The lifespan of people have increased to, for female in Malaysia is 80 something already. Men is the late 70s. You see, so age should not be a barrier.
Correct.
As long as patients are they're healthy.
Correct. Okay. And then circumstances, special circumstances is like not only elderly and adolescent, but even patients who are, let's say, amputees. So we had a patient who actually had a amputation of one of his limbs, started putting on weight, and couldn't fit into the prosthesis. So he actually came to us for bariatric surgery under OKU. Okay, so orang kurang upaya. And the what do you call it, the subcategory of OKU was very supportive for him and actually paid for his surgery, the devices and everything. And actually, he actually lost weight, so he was able to actually get into a prosthesis and also resume on his ambulation. Otherwise, he's only confined to a wheelchair. Okay, so these are the other special circumstances that we will see. Okay, so in terms of the another component that we have in our guideline that we discuss about is the fulfilling the criteria for bariatric surgery. So it's clearly stipulated that a person should have tried non-surgical attempts at weight reduction. Now, this is to make sure that before you go for surgery, you have already tried other weight loss solutions and so on. Because we don't want people to just come for surgery thinking it's the first line, it's the, we're not even considering about diet, exercise, other options available. And you think
not
that
the easy way out.
Yes, correct. So I think that's where we came up with this, number one criteria there. Now, in terms of patient commitment, Mr. Vimal, maybe you would like to talk about that?
Yes. Okay. We have explained all the risks involved, all the benefits involved. It is not the fact that there are plenty of guidelines, a lot of rules and guidelines to follow for everyone, which has been clearly spelled, means there are certain risks, and we can easily reduce the risk. And part of the risk is patient related. It's not only the surgery and the hospitalization, it's a journey. It starts before surgery, well before surgery. That's why we have a team. So if the patient is not committed and you're not sitting with the surgeon or the dietitian or the physician for the entire period of 2 years, it is just on and off, you're coming into hospital, getting checked, going back. So a large portion of time is spent on your own. So you need patients who are committed. Now, when you come into our system, we will try to teach you this discipline and commitment, attempt to change your behavior and response to change of behavior to our therapy. So patient commitment is very important, because if you don't have commitment, no matter what you do, of course the surgery will work. You will lose weight. You will get healthier. But with commitment, you will lose more weight and you will stay healthier longer.
Yeah, totally agreed. And I think a very important part is that besides the follow-up also, we want you all, because when you lose weight and in a form of bariatric surgery, it's just like a group, So imagine all the patients who have breast cancer. So we have a breast cancer support group after that for them to support them emotionally, to have a group that they belong to and so on. So because it's for the long term, once you're a cancer patient, you're a cancer survivor, it's with you. It's a label that is with you for the rest of your life. So same with our bariatric patients also. Once they undergo bariatric surgery, they are considered a patient who has undergone bariatric surgery. So they need to have that acceptance that I am already in a group where I want to belong. So this is where we have our agenda to form a support group as well to handle all this as well. Okay, so give you a form of a support group that we can be a part of, and of course to have a group, a community of like-minded people to join forces and take care of your journey together for the rest of your life as well. And then in terms of recommendation for your healthcare, you might just think that, okay, after surgery I just have to control my diet, eat and maintain. So it may be a difficulty in itself, because you know why? The amount that you can take may be lesser. Back to your dietary habits, your outlook, your clothing will change. You will have to change your wardrobe. You will have to, make some adjustments to your lifestyle to maintain your muscle. So you need to exercise. I think I saw our friend, fitness coach, Mr. Francis Wong here as well. So you need to go and see Francis to exercise, to get your exercise regime and so on. And then after that, you need your supplementation, medication that you need to take. Sometimes it's not medication, it's just vitamins. So we advise you to take vitamin because you're used to taking so much. Now you have reduced your amount. Whether it's enough or not, you just take a capsule of vitamin a day and the rest of it will be passed out in your system. and then you need to do your blood test. People think once you do bariatric surgery, that's it. I'm never going to be sick again. You don't understand that, yes, your blood pressure can rise because of your age. It can also, your pancreas functioning for your insulin in terms of your diabetes can come back later in life as well. So you got to be aware of that. And some people who have dangerous habits like smoking, drinking alcohol, uncontrolled and all that, we need to deal with it. Try to limit you from all these addiction problems and all. So that's where we come together with our multidisciplinary team. Okay, so now we've covered the selection, why, what, how, decision process. Now we come to the procedure itself. What procedure is the best one for you? So I will, maybe I'll take the first restrictive part of the surgery, and then Mr. Vimal will talk about the malabsorptive part. So
maybe I can explain roughly how surgery works, and then you explain the procedure, no?
Okay.
Since we are the expert at it.
Sure, Mr. Vimal.
Okay, so basically surgery, before we look at the types of surgery, let's discuss about how we do surgery. Now, surgery, to do surgery, you know, patients are all very big, obese, and generally can occupy more than the OR table. The OR table has to be large size, okay, specially designed for people with obesity. And we have that. Okay, our theater operating room table can withstand a weight of up to 360 kilos. Okay, in position, different position. Okay, that's the most important thing, the table. Then anesthetists well trained to give anesthesia. Once you anesthetize, then we do keyhole surgery. Keyhole surgery means we make a series of small incisions, about 5 to 10 or 12 millimeter in size, on the abdomen, and then go in. Usually one is for the camera, so you can see it on screen. Two for the surgeon's right, one for his right hand and one for left hand. Usually one for the assistant and one for the liver. You see the stomach sits under the liver, so you have to lift the liver up to see the whole of the stomach. So all your surgeries are around the stomach. Now you can put a gastric band, which was very popular those days. We put a procedure. So this one, Mr. Kiru will advise. Okay. So the surgery is done by keyhole. Now, keyhole means small incisions go in and do. So the benefit of keyhole surgery is you recover very well. We have patients operated in the morning. By evening, they are walking around in the ward. You see, that's how comfortable they are with very minimal pain relief which we give. Okay, so the pain is very minimal. The wound is very small, cosmetically pleasing wound, especially for women. The recovery is faster. You can go back to your routine activity within 1 or 2 days. You know, you can even go back to work in a few days if you want to. So these are all the benefits of laparoscopic surgery. Now, after surgery, post-op care, normally we will keep them in the high dependency unit. High dependency unit needs to be well stocked with expert nurses who know how to manage patients who are large. The beds have to be large to accommodate these patients. All the devices which we use to monitor the patient from so that we know where if and when something goes wrong. Okay, so these are all the aspects of surgery which is important. The technical aspect, I will let Mr. Kiru to enlighten you.
Okay, so as you can see in this diagram here, this is only covering 4 different types of surgery. Okay, so when we say bariatric surgery, people will think there's only one, but in actual fact, there are few different types. In fact, if you look at the world now, there are about at least 10 to 12 different types of surgery, a variation of what you see here. Okay, now one of the earlier form of surgery that used to be very popular, especially in Australia, Europe and all, was the gastric band. They called it as the laparoscopic adjustable gastric band. So you can see here, there is a device that is sitting in the top of the stomach. Okay, so you know my marker here, and that is the band that is pressing against the stomach. Okay, so now this band, what it does is it reduces the amount of food that can travel from the upper part of the stomach inside. And you can inflate that balloon or that band there to make it tighter or looser. So that's why this was quite popular, because it is a reversible procedure. If you don't want it, you just do surgery, you cut the band and take it out. Okay. Now the problem is that this adjustable gastric band procedure didn't have very good results. In other words, for all the costs and for all the effort, the weight loss was only about 20%. Now, if you're doing surgery for a weight loss of 20%, it's acceptable to you, then majority will opt for it because it's totally reversible. The other complications related to that, there is some issue because if the whole tube or the whole is a foreign body, something that is not supposed to be in the abdomen, but if it's there, it gets infected, you have to take it out. So there goes your whole investment. Okay. Now, what became very popular now is the sleeve gastrectomy. That is the second picture here. So basically what you do, you cut the stomach in the shape of a banana. Okay. And then you remove this portion of the stomach. So I spoke about this in our last episode. So I won't go into much details, but I will tell you that this is what you call as restrictive. That means you cut down the amount that you can take. Okay. So when you reduce the amount that you can take, definitely you will not be able to take more and put on weight. You will use your body fat and cut down, and your process to lose your weight will happen. Now, people don't understand. They feel that, okay, if I do the surgery, now pity the patient because he can't eat anymore. But you don't understand. If your set point was already here before, you are bringing the set point down so that you can maintain. So these patients who are undergone surgery, although they are eating lesser, they need to eat lesser. So basically, they don't need that much of food anymore. So that is why they can maintain. That's why they feel less hungry. And that's why they do not have to take so much of calories and food and overindulge like how they were before. Now, a much more stronger surgery to the restriction is a combination surgery, which is called malabsorption and restriction. So that is what you see the last two pictures here, which is the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, which is the king of all bariatric surgery, or what we call the gold standard. Okay, so every bariatric surgery is compared to the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass that you see here. Okay, so the procedure, I mentioned it in the previous episode as well, is basically connecting the stomach to the intestine and creating a bypass. So again, this is not like the sleeve where you remove a portion of the stomach. The stomach is still there, the intestines are still there. It is just from here, you bring it here, from here, you put it here. Okay, so in theory, you can reverse it if we need to, but in our experience, we have never reversed a procedure unless patient has some form of complications that we need to go back to normal anatomy. Now, a very new, in the last 5 to 10 years is the sleeve plus procedures. That means once you have done a sleeve gastrectomy, you do an additional bypass procedure, either to the small bowel, bringing it up to the end portion of the stomach, or you bypass a certain part of the intestine. Now, this is all very technical, so I won't go too much into detail, but rest assured there are other procedures that you can do to add on to the benefit of the sleeve gastrectomy. Now, what procedure is right for you? This is where we will discuss with you. We will go through all the investigation that we have done, find out whether this is suitable for you or not, and choose based on you. So we are not doing the surgery just because it's the only thing that I can do. Or, Mr. Vimal can only do a bypass, so he will only do bypass for you. No. Here you have the advantage of choosing which is the right one technically for you based on the evidence that we have now in 2021. Maybe in 2030, 2050, we will have a genetic test that can tell us which surgery is the best for you based on your genetic, based on your race, based on your diet pattern and so on. But until now, I think with our expertise and with our information that we have, we are making the right choices for the right patient. Anything to add, Mr. Vimal?
No, I think you covered it all very succinctly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll ask you to speak about the contraindication in bariatric surgery. So I think we have a few that absolutely no, and maybe some relative contraindication.
Okay. So contraindication means what patients you should not operate on for obesity. So the absolute contraindication obviously is the patient who's pregnant. Okay. We don't operate on them if their current problem is obesity. We wait for them to complete their pregnancy, their breastfeeding, everything. And maybe, about a year or so later, they are still keen, and then they can do. If those who want to plan to get pregnant in the future, we also can do the procedure, but we tell them to avoid pregnancy for a duration of 6 months, but maybe a year to a year and a half. Isn't that, Thiru?
Yeah, correct. That's right. 1 year and a half will be the best lah.
Yeah. Those are in the guidelines, and for obvious reasons, we don't want them to do these kind of procedures when they are going to be pregnant, or they are pregnant, or if they are planning to get pregnant. Then, if the patient who is not able to follow up, they are also we try not to operate, because these patients don't show commitment. We are not in it to just operate and make money. We also take pleasure in patients losing weight successfully, safely, and we like the look on the patient's face when they are so happy. They can wear their old clothes. They are so happy that their diabetes has regressed, and almost no medication or no medication at all. So those are the endpoints which gives us happiness and pleasure as surgeons and as the team. Okay, to the patient, that's why it's very important to have committed patients. Unfortunately, this is a very gray line. It's very difficult to detect, because when they talk to you, everybody seems committed. But the problems will come later on, because life takes over, they may be transferred. That's why it's very good that we have a society, we have a group of surgeons who are also doing this kind of surgery. So when you come to us, if you are going to another state, we will help to make arrangements for you to be followed up in other states as well. And Malaysia is not such a big country where you cannot go from one end to another in the same day and go back. Yeah. So it's all possible. So, but commitment is important. That's why one of the reasons why this gastric band fell out of place, because people were lost to follow up. Yeah. Patients with psychological illness is quite common in those with obesity. It can be a part of the coping mechanism. That in itself is not a reason not to operate. But if they have got major depression, major neurological illnesses, we don't operate on them until that problem is settled. That's why part of our team is a psychologist or even a psychiatrist to identify these patients, so that we don't unnecessarily operate them and land up in other forms of trouble. Now, patients have alcohol abuse and drug dependency. If they give us the history, then those with the alcohol problem, maybe we will advise them to stop alcohol. We will delay the surgery if we must. So this is very important also. You don't want to have a patient who is in substance abuse being operated, or having alcohol deprivation post-op. You will have a lot of problems and you have difficulty managing. Of course, patients who are having terminal illness, stage 3, stage 4 of cancer and all that, we avoid doing, because you really cannot give medium to long-term benefit. Okay, there's no point giving short-term benefit. So these are the absolute contraindications or contraindications. But from case to case, we will consider too. Thiru, would you like to add on anything?
Yeah, I think the final thing I need to add on is definitely someone who's capable of coming for our follow-ups and our, is able to comply with our instructions, the diet protocol after surgery and so on. Because you don't want a patient going eating chicken chop after surgery day 3, day 4, and causing a risk for our surgical repair and everything, and then causing complications.
Yeah, but however, that said and done, this pandemic has taught us to rely a lot on the online platforms. Yeah. So we also have started taking online follow-ups of patients. So this is a good thing which we can continue doing into the future, especially those patients who come from afar and get operated by us and then go back. So they need not come physically to your clinic. So this is what the pandemic has taught many of us.
Yeah, I think what you say is true. So they can actually hook up with us on our Facebook, our Penang weight loss platform, and make an appointment. We have our virtual health online platform that we can actually get in touch with them and to answer their questions as well as the follow-ups as that you had just mentioned. So coming to the closing final part of our session is the benefits and the barriers. So I think the benefits in surgical option, of course, better health. Okay, I would say the first step of why we are doing all this from the beginning that we started, an hour ago, is about trying to get yourself into a better health perspective, whether it's cosmetic, whether it's for social, conditions, psychological, and so on. But definitely, if you already have, as you can see in this diagram, the benefit is across the board in all spectrums, from your head all the way down to your toes. Now, if you're talking about, weight gain because of, causing depression or causing migraines, headaches, and all that, by losing weight, one way you can actually improve your depression, your migraine, your sleep apnea, that amount of fat that is surrounding around your airway. As you can see here, there's almost a 70 to 90% resolution. And in certain conditions, like even polycystic ovarian syndrome, because of the dramatic weight loss, there is 100% resolution and improvement in fertility and in other associated conditions to PCOS. And we are not even talking about the diabetes as well as the cardiac risk factors, asthma, degenerative joint diseases, and so on. So if your weight is about 100 over kilos, you have been struggling with it all your time, you're considering it, ask yourself from the beginning of the program until now, try to strategize according to that and come to this point, and maybe that will aid in your decision-making process. Anything about the benefits, Mr. Bimal?
Yeah, I think most of it you have covered. Suffice to say, all these benefits are proportionate to the weight loss, and they are sustained over a longer period of time. Many studies have shown that even up to a period of 10 years after surgery, patients still, as long as they are committed to their lifestyle and all that, enjoy the benefit of the surgery.
Okay, well said. So I think this is just nice. We are coming to the end of the last slide, actually. So when we're talking about barriers, like I was telling you just now, we are taking it in our next session, which is 2 weeks from now, okay? Because next week is Deepavali. So we're talking about the barriers to surgery. That is the fear, safety, the complications of the procedure. We will discuss more about that. The cost, why the cost is such, and why there is a lot of limitations to people who want to go because of these factors. And what are the options? Of course, when we give you the problem, we also give you the solution. So you have KWSP withdrawal, and we'll get someone from the fintech industry to share about fintech, financial loans on that aspect as well, from the company, banks, and so on. And again, of course, during this time as well, we will continue having our lucky draw session, in that period. Yeah. So I think the next part of it, is there any questions that we can take? Then I can stop sharing the slide for a while. And if you do find this session engaging, please share with your colleagues, friends, and so on. And please invite anyone who would like to join us, for any assistance or for any opinion and thing that you might have. So just give me a minute. Yeah, is there any questions from anybody?
There's one on the chat box.
Yeah, maybe Vishal, can you read the chat?
Yeah, okay, I'll read. Doctor, if I have anxiety problem, how should I overcome it and proceed for surgery?
Okay. So you want to answer that?
You take it, please.
Okay. So if you have any anxiety issues, of course, what we will do, we will actually liaise you with our team. So we have our counselor who will actually go through your, we have a scoring chart lah. Okay. We have a screening form, which will actually identify whether you do have anxiety issues that is related to psychological issues, or because of your work-related stress or something in that nature, maybe relationships and so on. And if they can manage, then we will start intervening, giving you treatment option and so on. And if we do find out that there's an underlying psychiatric illness that is the root of this problem, then we will refer you accordingly. Now, once you have been treated, once you have been given the solution, under control, and if your weight is still the problem, and you're treated well, you're under what you call as remission, then we will still proceed for the surgical option based on your condition at that point. Okay, so we don't simply rush and say that no, you can't do, because you have many other illness, not just because of your anxiety. We have to look at whether you're a diabetic, other medical issues as well, your social conditions, like I mentioned, your psychological issues that is brought you to come and see us, and of course your joints, mechanical issues and all. So based on that, then we make a decision from that. Anything to add?
Anxiety per se is not a contraindication to the surgery. Yep. A lot of people, the anxiety may be due to many reasons. One being the thought of going for surgery. So there's some amount of apprehension and anxiety. So I wouldn't say that. So that is our role, to make sure patients are not so anxious, and we explain the procedure properly. We explain to them how we will take care of them, how the team will take care of them. So all this may help to allay some of the anxiety.
Yeah. So actually, I've started sharing again. Can you all see my slide? Actually, this is a gentleman who is one of our patients who was 148 kilos in the beginning. He's a very nice gentleman, and he's a very good friend of mine. And he actually came to see us for weight loss surgery because he was having hypertension, diabetes, and he's having obstructive sleep apnea as well. So all these medical issues, came to a point where he was in ICU, and the doctors in ICU told him, I think you better go for bariatric surgery, because if you land up here again, you probably will not go home. So this is what was his factor that changed his life and made him make the decision to come and see us to undergo for bariatric surgery. And this is him after successfully undergoing of all his medications. He's actually very happy because he's able to travel. I know the center picture is when he was traveling. And of course, it's given him a new lease of life. And the patient is in his late 40s. Okay, so the minute you lose weight, suddenly you'll start feeling younger. You look younger as well. Okay, so this is another gentleman who was 105 kilos. He lost 36 kilos. He lost 36 kilos to his current weight. At this point, when he lost weight, again, this gentleman also was off his medication, felt so much more better in terms of mobility, helped his work, gave him a new lease of life as well. This is a nice teacher who weighed 142.8 kilos, and she lost about almost 45 kilos. Okay, and being a teacher is very important for you to be on the go. Okay, now because we have COVID, so most of them are teaching from home. It's all virtual. But at that time, can you imagine when she was actually teaching in class, actually fell asleep because of the sleep apnea? That's when the headmaster actually told her, you better go and seek treatment. So this is how some patients will get referred. So we had engineers who were referred because of certain things that they couldn't do on-site field work. We had certain firemen who couldn't fit the criteria and probably had to resign or retire. So they had to come to us to lose weight. Either kaki tangan kerajaan or even private, people in the private sector. Then you have this young boy. This gentleman is actually about 23 years old, just finished college at that time, and he weighed a hefty 145 kilos. His BMI was about 56 because he was short. And at that time, he came to see us because he didn't have much comorbids, but like I said, if your BMI fits the criteria, you do not have medical issues, you have social issues, psychological issues, and so on, this is something that you might want to consider. So this is what he needed, because being ridiculed for all his life for the weight and so on made him make a change, and his parents were very supportive. So this is where the decision making with your family is very important, because once you have the support, then you come and see us. We will be the final one to support you on your journey by deciding whether this is right for you or not. And successfully losing weight changing your outlook, gives you a different factor in your life. And now he's currently embarking in his own business after completing his business studies as well. So this young lady weighed 119 kilos. She slimmed down all the way to about 55 at this one, about 2 or 3 years ago. And the main reason for her was to change her, to give her a better confidence, better lease of life. At that time when I saw her, she was single. And until now, we are still in very good contact. She has just got married a couple of years ago. And, because of the relationship and so on, now looking forward to having a child and carrying on with her next phase in her life. So this is another very interesting lady who weighed about 148.5 kilos at her maximum, and she lost 83.5. So when she did her surgery at that time, like the previous patient also, she was single, available, subsequently got married, and about 3 years ago, she delivered her first child. She was operated in 2016. Okay, so that's why I say sometimes if you look at the picture on your left, of course, her life might go on. She would have got married. We're not sure whether she would have had a child or so on. But this is the trajectory that you took, and this is a success that she has and that we can share. So maybe it is not everybody will feel it's the right thing for them, but individually, if you feel like this is something that is something for you and so on, then we can actually help you out on that. So our next session is tackling the barriers to surgery. I think now
one question here, Kiru.
Yeah, sure.
Jagesh wants to know about obstructive sleep apnea. Maybe you can enlighten a bit.
So, Jagesh, obstructive sleep apnea is basically because of fat deposition around your airway. Okay, so if you look here, this is your trachea, the part that connects your mouth and your nose. What you call as the airway, the nasopharynx, going down into the lungs. So this is a very important part for us to breathe. Around it, you have the esophagus at the back, which is your tube that we swallow. We speak through it, we swallow, and that is behind. And you have our vessels on the left and the right. Now, surrounding all of that is our fat. Okay, so if this fat suddenly expands because of, we put on weight and so on, then it can be very dangerously compressing in the neck. And what happens is it cuts off the oxygen supply to the brain. What happens is you tend to be more somnolence, somnolescence. That means you tend to fall asleep. So if I'm talking like this, I'm very wide awake. But for the people who have sleep apnea, they'll be listening to what I'm talking and suddenly they'll fall asleep. So if you happen to fall asleep when you're riding your motorbike or driving a car, then it can be very, very dangerous. It can affect your life. You might be involved in a very fatal accident. So how do you know you got sleep apnea? We will do something called a sleep study, where we can attach some wires to your body and ask you to sleep. So during the night, how many times you stop breathing, how many times your apneic spells cause your heart rate to drop and all that, we'll be able to catch it, and we will know objectively whether you have sleep apnea or not. And based on this, we can treat you by advising you weight loss surgery, or even whether you have any problem in your airway or your nasopharynx that needs to be addressed by our ENT colleague. Okay, I hope that's clear.
Yeah, that's clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagesh.
There is also a question on how soon can I expect to lose weight after surgery. So I will take this. And there's another one, how long do I need to take to recover from surgery? So I will talk on the weight loss. So that's actually a question every patient of ours will ask. How soon can you expect to lose weight? Now, the answer to that is you lose weight before your surgery. It sounds crazy, right? But actually, about 2 weeks before your surgery is scheduled, we will put you on very low calorie diet. This is a liquid-based milk preparation, which you have to drink every day and you cannot take any meals during this 2 weeks, no solid meals anyway. So all liquid-based diet, and we calculate the calories and we give it to the patient. They take this for 2 weeks. The calorie content is about 800 per day, so which is very low, creates an energy deficit. So you will start losing weight. Now, the benefit of doing this 2 weeks before surgery is, one, to lose weight. When you lose even a few kilos of your weight, technically your health improves. So the risk of the surgery further improves. Okay. Second, as you know, I said the liver sits on top of the stomach. So we have to lift the liver to do the surgery around the stomach. So we have many people know that there is a condition called fatty liver. Now, in those who are obese, the liver is sometimes very huge and it's very soft. So in the process of pushing it up, sometimes you can tear it. So the 2 weeks of low-calorie diet, very low-calorie diet, makes the liver smaller and firmer and less likely to tear. So this also improves the risk of the surgery. So you actually start losing weight. In fact, for me, if my patient, I always see the patient who are counseled for surgery about 1 or 2 days before surgery. Now, if there is no weight loss or there is weight gain, I do not hesitate to delay the surgery. I tell patients, you have to show commitment. Otherwise, some patients, what they will do, they think, oh, okay, I'm going for surgery tomorrow. Let me have one nice nasi kandar 1 or 2 days before. So they will gain weight. So this is a no-no. So you have to show commitment. Commitment means losing weight. It's not my own practice. Studies shows if you lose weight before surgery, you will do well after surgery. So this is a benefit. So you lose weight. Then after surgery, when you go back, we keep you on this very low calorie diet for at least another 1 or 2 weeks more. Then slowly we introduce blended diet and liquid soft diet and all that over a period of a month. So this period is where the stomach heals and recovers, so that the risk of leakage and all that is reduced. Okay. So during this time also, you will continue to lose weight because you are taking low calorie. Then the effect of the surgery will start kicking in, and the effect you will keep on losing. We want a loss of about 1 or 2 kilos a week. Okay, and depending on the type of surgery, this effect can go on for usually for sleep up to a year, bypass a bit longer for longer. Okay, then you will probably plateau. Your weight loss will plateau at a certain level, means you will not lose much. Okay, and then all the benefit of teaching you how to lose, how to eat well, how to count your calories, and how to live well, how to exercise, such as what the team has advised, will kick in. So if you follow this, then you maintain your weight. Otherwise, you regain weight. So I think this answers the question. Maybe Kiro, you can answer about how long it takes to recover from surgery.
Sure. So I think I will, this is the last question in the panel. So I'll answer this question and then we will straight go to what everybody is waiting for, the lucky draw. So in terms of the recovery, if let's say we operate today, so today evening is, it's about almost 7 now. So basically we will start you on clear fluids ready. If you operate in the morning, we want you to be sitting up by now, and we want you to slowly, gently ambulate to the toilet in the evening. By tomorrow, you're back in the ward. You should be walking around. Your pain also will come down. If you stay somewhere quite nearby to Penang, then we will discharge you in the evening. If not, the following morning. Okay. Now, once you go home, we want you to ambulate. We want you to walk. We need you to walk, because you know why? Your calf muscles must start pumping to allow the blood from the leg to go up. So this is to prevent something called deep vein thrombosis or blood clots in your leg. So that's why we want you to walk. So when you ask me about the recovery process, definitely you should be walking back home. You should be walking actively at home. We don't need you to do 10,000 steps, but you need to do a few hundred to about 1,000. Okay. We need you to do your breathing exercises to make sure you don't develop lung collapse or lung infection, or what you call as atelectasis. Okay. Now, you can do this by a device that we have called a spirometer, where it can show you how much of volume of lung capacity that you are breathing in. Strong ventilation like that. And you can see the machine will actually go up to about 2,000, 2,500, and sometimes some patients can even do to 3 to 4,000. So this will be done in the few days after surgery until 1 week, where we will see you at follow-up. Now, during that time, a lot of people will tell me, doctor, I feel much better. my wound has healed. We'll do a wound inspection of your wound, check everything is all right, and we will give you a follow-up again in 1 month. Now, the idea here is the diet that you are going to go through after surgery, because the first few days you will be taking fluid and also what you call it, liquid juice that is clear with high in calorie for you to give you energy. After the first week, you will gradually go on to nourishing fluids, soup, more watery diet, subsequently soft, semi-solid, blended diet, and finally normal soft diet with a reduced portion based on your calorie counts, which our dietitian will prepare. So this is what you call as a step ladder gradual back to normal. So during this period, when we give you your MC for, let's say, 2 weeks, or depends on your nature of work. If you travel around a lot driving, or you're in a position where you tend to be dehydrated, you don't have access to food, anything, then we'll give you a bit longer MC for you to gradually catch up. Now, by 2 to 3 weeks, you're generally back to really normal already. Okay, so that's where you should be starting to walk, going outside, starting to do light exercises and so on. By 1 month, you should be able to do your regular activity, exercises, back to work and so on like normal. Okay, so this is how we see the recovery process. Because of the era of laparoscopy, like Mr. Bimal mentioned earlier, is much more better compared to open surgery. Those days they used to make a big cut from here to here, and then your recovery also is very slow. Like I'm saying, and the process probably will take over almost a month for you to even get back to the normal, for your wound all to heal and so on. So I think that's the reason why bariatric surgery is so powerful and so popular now, is because of the era of minimally invasive surgery. Okay, so I hope that answers that. And now coming to our lucky draw situation, I'm going to stop sharing here and pass the baton to our the people in our team to start our lucky draw session. So maybe we get Miss Lee to come on. Miss Lee.
Yes, okay, the lucky wheel is ready.
Lucky wheel, huh? Okay, Mr. Bimal, maybe you want to say start and stop?
Okay, start.
Wang besar, wang besar, wang besar.
Stop.
Peng,
Peng.
W. Peng, are you there?
Congratulations.
Peng? I think Peng is not there, lah.
Mr. Kiru, sorry, Mr. Wima, maybe you need to start
Spin
one more
again.
time. Yeah.
Okay, spin. Stop.
Thomas. Thomas?
Hello.
Don't answer.
Yeah. Hi.
Oh, Mr. Thomas, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Okay, we
Okay.
can start the next one.
Okay. Stop. Clarissa. But
Congrats, Clarissa.
Clarissa says that we can start again, huh?
You can start again.
Hey, so thanks, Clarissa. You're so kind of you.
One more time, Mr. Kiru.
Okay, right. Start. Stop.
Wow, this is every week winning.
Hello.
Hi,
win
Estelle.
again.
Wow, you're either I'm very lucky or you're very lucky, lah.
Yeah, double lucky. 2 weeks.
Okay.
Go and take Empat
So-
Ekor today.
Unfortunately, Estelle, you cannot win 2 weeks in a row, lah. Must give chance for others, lah. Boleh ga?
Okay, can.
Okay, thank you so
Okay.
kindly.
Okay.
Start. Let's give a bit longer lah this time. Okay, stop. Ng LT.
It's me though.
Okay.
Angie, congratulations.
Congrats.
You don't need anything near bariatric surgery, lah.
Okay. I think that's all for today. Is there any questions anybody has that would like to ask us before we wrap it up? Okay, if none, I would like to take this opportunity to wish everyone happy Deepavali. Next week is a holiday week. All the best in the coming week ahead, and see you all in 2 weeks' time. And that is when we're going to talk about the barriers in bariatric surgery. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome.
Have a good
Thank
weekend.
you very
Thank you.
much.
Happy
Thank
Diwali.
you.
Bye.